I fought for this country for 32 years. Now I'm being mocked for the medal I earned." Jonathan Cooper's words came out strained as he pressed against his chest, struggling for air, while three young men circled him menacingly. The bullies, focused solely on their target, remained oblivious to their surroundings. Just 30 feet away stood a royal guard, motionless in his position, but observing every detail of the confrontation. What these harassers failed to notice was that the seemingly defenseless veteran wasn't alone, and their cruel game was about to end in a way none of them expected. Want to see how this story unfolds? Hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. For more surprising twists you won't want to miss. Jonathan Cooper walked the grounds near Buckingham Palace, his RAF pin catching the evening sunlight as he moved with the measured pace of his 65 years. The golden rays illuminated the small metal emblem, a proud reminder of his 3 decades serving in the Royal Air Force. Cooper's posture remained impeccable despite his age. Spine straight, shoulders squared, chin tilted at the precise angle that had been drilled into him as a young recruit. Some habits never fade, even when the uniform is long gone. The pathways swelled with tourists, their excited chatter creating a backdrop of white noise that Cooper had learned to filter during his frequent visits. He was drawn to the ceremonial precision here, a reflection of his military past. His weathered fingers occasionally brushed against the Distinguished Service Order medal on his Navy blazer, awarded for Gulf War actions he rarely discussed. Cooper paused at the Victoria Memorial, feeling the familiar tightness building in his chest. 3 decades of flying through smoke-filled skies had scarred his lungs, leaving him with asthma that first appeared in his 50s, a lasting reminder of jet fuel fumes and desert sand. The marble monument stood before him, its golden angel gleaming in the fading light, a testament to endurance much like his own military career. While admiring the memorial, Cooper sensed a shift in the atmosphere. 2 young men watched him from the edge of the crowd, their posture betraying a predatory alertness that distinguished them from casual visitors. The taller one, shaved head, muscular build partially concealed by a black leather jacket, nudged his companion while maintaining unsettling eye contact with Cooper. The evening air grew heavier in his lungs as stress triggered his condition. Cooper regulated his breathing using practiced techniques, but the tightness spread across his chest like a constricting band. His hand moved instinctively to his right pocket, checking for his inhaler with the subtle efficiency of a military assessment. The gesture didn't escape notice. The taller man, Greg Mitchell, leaned toward his companion, Danny Harris, whispering something that prompted matching smirks. Cooper tracked their approach with the tactical awareness that had preserved him through combat. Greg moved with the confidence of practiced intimidation, his path deliberately intersecting Cooper's. Danny assumed a flanking position, a coordination immediately recognizable to Cooper's trained eye. Cooper's breathing became increasingly labored, each inhale requiring greater effort, as a telltale wheeze accompanied his exhales. Still, he maintained his bearing, shoulders back, expression neutral, refusing to display vulnerability. Greg's gaze fixed on Cooper's RAF pin, his expression transforming from general menace to focused contempt. The small emblem had triggered something deeper, converting Cooper from random target to specific focus. Danny's face hardened as he noticed the medal. Cooper attempted a tactical retreat as tourists sensed the tension, creating a small clearing in the crowded path. Parents pulled children closer, couples moved away, yet no one intervened. The bystander effect Cooper recognized from combat zones. His airways continued to constrict with each step. The familiar panic rose, not fear of the approaching men, but the primal terror of failing lungs. His fingers brushed against the inhaler again, a motion Greg tracked with predatory interest. These bullies had singled him out deliberately. The RAF pin worn with quiet pride had become a beacon for their cruelty, a symbol of authority they sought to undermine. His labored breathing and discreet checks for his inhaler had revealed the vulnerability they intended to exploit. Predators in nature target the weakest members of the herd, and human bullies operate with the same cold calculation. As Greg and Danny closed in on Cooper, The distance between him and his inhaler suddenly seemed like miles instead of inches. The veteran's decades of tactical training couldn't help him escape when his own lungs were betraying him. These young men had already scented blood in the water, and the service pin that represented Cooper's sacrifice was about to become their trophy. "Oi, veteran, RAF is it? Must have been something back in the day. Bit past your prime now, though, aren't you?" Greg's voice sliced through the evening air, sharp and deliberate. Cooper maintained his composure, drawing on years of discipline from facing far more dangerous adversaries than these street thugs. But this battle was different. His enemy wasn't just the two men approaching. It was the growing tightness in his chest threatening to render him defenseless. The confrontation unfolded with choreographed precision. Greg and Danny flanked Cooper from both sides, their movements practiced and coordinated. They moved with the fluidity of predators who had done this before, cornering their prey with methodical efficiency. Cooper attempted to sidestep, but Greg smoothly intercepted him, planting himself directly in Cooper's path. The invasion of personal space was immediate, a classic intimidation tactic. Danny circled behind, cutting off any possibility of retreat. Around them, tourists sensed the brewing conflict. A subtle shift rippled through the crowd as people created distance. Some hurriedly ushered their children away, while others pulled out phones, modern witnesses who documented but didn't intervene. Cooper's military bearing remained intact, but his breathing grew increasingly labored. The tightness in his chest intensified with each passing moment. "Look at you now, hero. Can't even catch your breath," Greg taunted, his eyes fixed on Cooper's service pin, the emblem representing years of dangerous missions and sacrifices few civilians could understand. Cooper's hands trembled slightly from oxygen deprivation. He stood tall despite it, unwilling to show weakness. His military training hadn't prepared him for fighting an enemy within his own body while facing external threats. "All those medals and honors, and here you are begging street lads for attention," Greg sneered, words calculated to provoke. Cooper remained silent, conserving his dwindling breath. His eyes scanned for an escape route, but the tourists remained at a safe distance, unwilling to intervene. Then came the breach, the moment when words transformed into physical assault. Greg stepped closer, his chest nearly touching Cooper's. "What's this little pin worth anyway?" His fingers reached for the RAF service pin. "Probably just cheap metal they hand out to make you lot feel special." Cooper's hand moved to protect his pin, but the motion was slow, hampered by his respiratory distress. Greg was faster. With a swift movement, he grabbed the pin and yanked it from Cooper's jacket. The fabric tore with a sound that cut through Cooper like a bullet, the violent separation of honor from the man who earned it. "Look at that. Falls off easy. Can't be worth much," Greg laughed, pocketing it. The loss felt like a physical blow. That small piece of metal represented decades of sacrifice, of missed birthdays and holidays, of friends lost in service. Cooper's vision began to blur as his oxygen-starved body protested. His legs weakened, forcing him to grasp a nearby railing for support. His knuckles whitened with the effort to remain standing. The human body has priorities that override dignity, training, and even courage. And Cooper's was now making the desperate calculation that only those facing suffocation truly understand. As his hand instinctively reached for his pocket, Greg's eyes narrowed with the particular interest of someone who has just spotted something valuable their victim doesn't want them to find. "What's that you keep reaching for, old man?" Greg's voice dropped an octave, transforming from mockery to threat. "Show me what you're hiding." Cooper tried to step back, but his lungs refused to cooperate. His breathing produced a thin whistle as memories of standing tall during medal ceremonies flashed through his mind. His fingers fumbled at his pocket, driven by his body's desperate need for air. "I said show me!" Greg lunged forward, grabbing Cooper's jacket with practiced efficiency. His fingers dipped into Cooper's pocket and emerged clutching the blue inhaler. Well, well, what's this little toy? Greg held it up, examining it with exaggerated curiosity. Cooper's face had taken on a gray pallor, oxygen levels in his blood plummeting. The room where he'd once briefed generals on critical missions seemed impossibly far away now. Greg tossed the inhaler to Danny, who caught it one-handed. "Looks like our war hero needs his puffer," Danny laughed, tossing it between his hands. "Not so tough now, are you?" Cooper's military bearing, the straight spine and squared shoulders that had defined him for decades, crumbled under the weight of biological necessity. His trembling hands reached toward the inhaler, a wordless plea more desperate than any he'd ever made. "Want this?" Danny held the inhaler just beyond Cooper's reach, yanking it away each time the older man got close. Cooper stumbled forward, his coordination failing as hypoxia affected his motor skills. The clear-headed precision that once guided him through combat zones dissolved into primal need. "I think he really needs it, Greg," Danny said, his voice betraying a flicker of concern as Cooper visibly deteriorated. Greg snatched the inhaler from Danny's hand. For a moment, Cooper's eyes lit with hope. Instead, Greg dropped it to the pavement and brought his boot down with deliberate force. The crack of plastic shattering echoed off surrounding buildings. "Oops," Greg said flatly, grinding his heel. "Should have brought a spare." The fragments scattered across the stones, the medication now a useless smear. Cooper watched in horror as his only chance at relief vanished. His lips took on a bluish tint, cyanosis signaling critical oxygen deprivation. His knees gave way. Cooper collapsed to the ground, one hand stretched toward the destroyed inhaler, the other clutching at his throat. His vision tunneled as his brain prioritized vital functions. For an instant, he saw himself standing at attention, saluting the flag as a general pinned medals to his chest. That pride dissolved into the desperate present. Greg stood over him, unmoved. "Look at you. All those years of service, and this is how it ends? On your knees, gasping like a fish? Pathetic?" Cooper could barely register the words anymore. Each failed attempt to breathe brought him closer to unconsciousness. His body shut down non-essential functions to preserve what little oxygen remained. The primal terror of suffocation overwhelmed everything: pride, dignity, even awareness. "You've outlived your usefulness, old man," Greg continued, his voice seeming distant as Cooper's consciousness ebbed. "Nobody needs your kind anymore. Nobody cares." Greg's declaration that nobody cared proved catastrophically wrong when the still evening air was split by the unmistakable sound of a royal guard's measured footfall. While tourists had backed away and locals hurried past, Guard Thomas Ashford had observed every detail from his ceremonial post. To most visitors, the guards in their scarlet tunics and bearskin hats appeared as nothing more than living statues, photographic opportunities frozen in tradition. They didn't see the years of specialized training beneath the ornamental exterior. The air shifted. Ashford's decision happened in microseconds, a neural calculation balancing royal protocol against his sworn duty to protect. His gloved fingers, motionless for hours, twitched. His spine straightened from parade rest to combat ready, a transition invisible to casual observers but clear to anyone with military experience. In that moment, Ashford broke with tradition. Few guards had ever abandoned their posts during public duty, but the veterans' distress demanded action. Between one heartbeat and the next, Ashford transformed from sentinel to rescuer, moving with precision across the courtyard, ceremonial rifle secured across his back. His deliberate footfalls echoed against stone as he closed the distance, the scarlet uniform serving its original intimidation purpose. Greg, still sneering over Cooper's struggling form, registered the approaching threat too late. The white-gloved hand that descended onto his shoulder delivered a grip honed during Ashford's time with the Special Air Service. Precisely positioned fingers sent pain through Greg's nervous system, dropping him to his knees with efficient control. "On your knees, hands visible, do not move," Ashford commanded with the absolute certainty that soldiers recognize instantly. The voice of someone accustomed to being obeyed in life or death situations. Danny began backing away, the inhaler fragments forgotten at his feet. A single glance from Ashford stopped him cold. Danny raised his arms slowly in surrender. Maintaining his grip on Greg, Ashford retrieved an emergency inhaler from his tunic pocket. "RAF command, sir. Deep breath on my mark," he said to Cooper, his tone shifting to professional respect mixed with urgency. He administered the medication with his free hand. "Inhale. Now," he instructed. "Hold 2 seconds. Release." Cooper's oxygen-starved brain registered the military cadence before he could process the words. His body responded to the command structure embedded through decades of service. The medication began working as Ashford's disciplined breathing pattern helped maximize its impact. Cooper's lungs expanded more fully with each guided breath. Ashford worked with remarkable efficiency, subduing Greg, keeping Danny in place, administering medication, and protecting Cooper from further harm. Each action flowed into the next without hesitation. Police whistles pierced the evening air as palace security personnel converged on the scene. 2 officers secured Danny while another approached Greg. "Assault of a vulnerable person, destruction of medical equipment, public disturbance," Ashford reported as he transferred Greg to the officers. "The gentleman required emergency medical intervention." Only then did Ashford fully turn his attention to Cooper, kneeling beside him with professional respect. Cooper's color gradually improved with each breath, the alarming blue tinge receding from his lips. "Security footage captured everything, sir," Ashford informed him. "Medical response is 60 seconds out. Your statement can wait until you're stabilized." Throughout the methodical activity that followed, officers securing the area, medics arriving, tourists being directed away, Ashford maintained his military bearing, his intervention now part of a new mission, ensuring a fellow serviceman received the dignity and care he deserved. With measured movements, Cooper steadied himself and straightened his spine. The medication had done its work despite his shallow breathing. The empty space where his service pin should be was noticeable, yet his posture revealed a rekindled dignity that transcended physical emblems. As their eyes met, Cooper summoned his strength. Drawing himself to attention, he executed a crisp salute, an invisible bridge connecting their shared sacrifices. Ashford pivoted immediately, returning the gesture with perfect form. In that wordless exchange, decades of understanding passed between them. 2 men united by a commitment few civilians could truly comprehend. "Your service is not forgotten, sir," Ashford said quietly, his words resonating with genuine recognition. "Not by those who understand its cost,